Hello again, 110. In this video, I will be doing a brief outline of Chapter 7, the Executive Branch Bureaucracy, and it can be defined as the complex structure of offices, tasks, rules, and principles of organization that are employed in most formal and sustained administrations. All institutions have some form of bureaucracy because these are the actors who are going to actually carry out specific functions. And without bureaucracy, there would be no labor or specialization, and large organizations would not be able to function. And that's the big reason why bureaucracies allow government to operate in a country that has 330 plus million people. It provides for efficiency and speedy and equitable implementation theoretically when it works as it's supposed to. And a third reason for bureaucracy is politics. Legislators find it useful to delegate some decisions. They usually lack the expertise and they prefer that decisions be made by people who are in the field or who are actually working in these particular areas, rather than interested politicians. And we talked about that phenomena with iron triangles, which is where law is really made. The interaction between interest groups, congressional committees, and the bureaucracy. What do they actually do? They implement the efforts of departments and laws. And eventually, these agencies will develop routines. And sometimes that's known as red tape, which you as an individual may not be aware of. But because these people are there on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, they have specialized and broken down their task into these routines. You have to file this piece of paper, or you have to follow this particular policy. And this eventually it can be very annoying to people if they're not aware of what these specific rules and regulations are. And it is necessary that bureaucracies have this function because they will not be able to effectively operate without some sort of rules. And if this is not happy to the individuals involved, administrative adjudication can kick in, where these rules and precedents will be applied. And if that doesn't settle the dispute, then the courts will step in. How is the executive branch organized? You have cabinet departments like the Department of Homeland Security. We've talked about this already in Chapter 6. Independent agencies, government corporations, independent regulatory commissions, such as the Federal Election Commission or the Federal Communications Commission. And these independent commissions tend to be insulated from politics. And that was by design, because they exist as different presidential administrations come and go. They're still there. There are 4 missions of agencies. There are client agencies or clientele agencies where they have field offices, especially in the departments of agriculture and labor, where they will do functional representation for their clients. They represent a particular interest in the field. There are maintenance agencies that help keep the government running and the nation secure. Revenue agencies like the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, or the Department of Justice, which historically, before Homeland Security, was responsible for security within the United States. External security was done by the armed forces since 1947, the Department of Defense, and in diplomacy, the State Department is also involved in external security historically. There are redistributive agencies, and this is a huge topic, ladies and gentlemen. The proponents of fiscal policy tend to be liberals. They tend to favor taxing and spending and redistribution of wealth in order to solve social problems. And these different taxation policies are done by the Department of the Treasury. There is monetary policy, which tends to be favored by conservatives. They believe that at the federal level, the only function should be in regulating the money supply by the Federal Reserve, the raising and the lowering of discount rates, the raising and lowering of interest rates. And in this manner, either lowering or raising the money supply, the economy is affected tremendously. When there is more money in circulation, more loans tend to be made. When interest rates are low, people tend to want to take a chance and take a loan out. When interest rates are high, that tends to dampen down the money supply because people aren't as willing to borrow money at high rates, and that slows the economy down then. And most conservatives think that this should be the only federal government function. Welfare today, since the late 1990s, those direct transfers of wealth, has largely since 1996 been put back at the state level. The availability of welfare is really a function of where you live. Different states have different attitudes about this, and some states do not favor welfare policies. And the fourth mission is regulation, and those are two famous regulatory agencies, the Occupational Safety Health Administration and the Food and Drug Administration, heavily involved in regulation of private sector businesses. The problem of bureaucratic control. How motivated are these actors? This is a problem on a day-to-day basis. Some people are having a bad day. The policeman's having a bad day. A policeman is a bureaucratic actor. And depending upon how well funded these agencies are, may, in a greater or lesser degree, have problems over the individuals having the motivation to do their jobs. Bureaucrats want to believe that the mission of their agency is relevant and that it is necessary and that they're doing a good job. And Congress and the President may have difficulty determining need from want, which leads into this next slide. And as we're going through the remainder of the course, ladies and gentlemen, more and more of these straight textbook slides are used now. And if you have the e-book, they should be available to you. There are more for this particular chapter, but I have quite a few of them in this particular mini lecture. We talked about principal agent when talking about representation in Congress, and the bureaucratic actor has the same function. Is the agency still following original intention of the legislation, or has it developed a life of its own, which is what happens in bureaucracies? They tend to grow over time. And now they may be carrying out functions of the actors within the organization as opposed to the original intention of what the agency was supposed to be doing. And there is some presidential control over this by appointing sympathetic agency heads. Maybe they're not going to be as strict in their rulemaking. Maybe they are going to push things more into the private sector. There are after-the-fact controls like executive orders or changes in the budget or in reorganizing the bureaucracy. Regulatory review can also enhance presidential control. Congress can control the bureaucracy through the budget and oversight, and by changing the mission, by changing the language of what it is this agency is authorized to do. Other methods of controlling the bureaucracy, downsizing. This was big in the Reagan administration in certain agencies, but the reality was by the end of the 1980s, government had actually grown. In the 90s, devolution was practiced with welfare. It's difficult to get rid of clientele agencies in the field. Once they're established, people use these agencies and they get used to them being there. And that is the problem of public policy. Once you establish these institutions, they are very, very difficult to get rid of. At the local level, privatization has been used, and a good way of thinking about this is in garbage collection. There are many cities, here on Saipan as an example, garbage is done by a private or independent group. It is not done by the municipality as it is in some localities. And this is increasingly popular at different levels. And the answer to that question is local and state. Local is the best answer. These other two areas have been flat in their growth. And that ends chapter 7.